COVID-19 affects the global economy. While there is no way to tell exactly what the economic damage from the global COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic will be, there is widespread agreement among economists that it will have severe negative impacts on the global economy. Early estimates predicted that should the virus become a global pandemic, most major economies will lose at least 2.9% of their gross domestic product over 2020. This forecast was already restated to a GDP loss of 4.5%. To put this number in perspective, global GDP was estimated at around 87.55 trillion US dollars in 2019, meaning that a 4.5% drop in economic growth amounts to almost 3.94 trillion US dollars in lost economic output. Global stock markets have also suffered dramatic falls due to the coronavirus outbreak, although they were able to recover from the losses quite quickly. The Dow Jones reported its largest ever single-day loss of almost 3,000 points on March 16, 2020, beating its previous records of 2,300 points that was set only 4 days earlier. The economic damage caused by the COVID-19 pandemic is largely driven by a fall demand, meaning that there are less consumers willing to purchase the goods and services available in the global economy. This dynamic can be clearly seen in heavily affected industries such as travel and tourism. To slow the spread of the virus, countries have placed restrictions on travel and many people could not purchase flights for holidays or business trips. These reductions in consumers' demand was the reason why airlines lost planned revenue, and as a result, they had to cut their expenses by reducing the number of flights they operate. Without government assistance, eventually airlines will also need to lay off staff to cut more costs. The same dynamic applies to other industries. For example, with falling demand for oil and new cars as daily commutes, social events and holidays are no longer possible. As, as companies start to reduce employment to make up for lost revenue. The worry is that this will create a downward economic spiral when these newly unemployed workers can no longer afford to purchase as many goods and services as before. This dynamic makes the economists contemplate whether the COVID-19 pandemic could lead to a global recession on the scale of the Great Depression. Despite the clear danger that the global economy is in, there are also reasons to be hopeful that this worst-case scenario can be avoided. Governments have learned from previous crises that the effects of a demand-driven recession can be countered with the government spending. Consequently, many governments are increasing their provision of monetary welfare to citizens and ensuring businesses have the access the funds needed to keep their staff employed throughout the pandemic. In addition, the specific nature of this crisis means that some sectors may benefit from it. Example, e-commerce, food retail, and the healthcare industry provide at least some economic growth to offset the damage. Also, a crisis induced movement to online activities like working from home, purchasing goods online, contacting family, and etc. can be observed. It gives an opportunity for each solution provides to increase their market shares. Finally, there is the fact that the crisis may have a clear end date when all restrictions can be lifted. This seems to be possible when the majority of the global population is vaccinated against COVID-19. It could then enable the global economy to experience a sharp rebound once the pandemic is over. There are still many variables that could affect such an economic recovery. For example, a reduced supply of goods and services to meet lower demand could create mid-term shortage and price increases, but there are some reasons to think that with the right mix of appropriate government responses and luck, some of the more apocalyptic predictions may not come to pass.